He was just a technician. Now he's her only leverage. Eli Ward never expected trouble. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't brave. He was just a technician working night shift at a quiet Terran outpost near the Outer Rim. His job was simple. Check systems, run diagnostics, drink terrible coffee, and stay out of everyone's way. That night, everything changed. The sky above Base 17 cracked open like glass. A roaring sound hit the air, shaking the floor under Eli's feet. Red lights flashed. Sirens screamed. Unauthorized landing. Someone shouted over the intercom. Brace for impact. Eli barely had time to move when something massive tore across the landing field outside. He ran to the window. A black ship, sleek, sharp, and marked with alien symbols, slammed into the dirt with a bone-shaking crash. It skidded, flipped, then stopped, half buried in sand and fire. Alarms blared louder. Eli turned to run, but the door exploded inward. Smoke and sparks filled the room. She stepped through the smoke like a shadow made of steel, 8 feet tall, covered in alien armor. Her skin was dark gray with greenish veins glowing beneath. 2 sharp tusks curved from her jaw, but her eyes, those eyes, burned like cold stars. Before Eli could scream, she was on him. A clawed hand grabbed his arm. Her other hand crushed his mouth shut. She pulled him close, her breathing ragged. Quiet, human. She hissed in perfect English, "You move, you die." Eli nodded quickly, terrified. She smelled like fire and metal. Blood dripped from a wound on her side, soaking her armor. She dragged him through the hallway as soldiers scrambled nearby. Somehow she dodged every patrol, moving with skill and silent rage. Eli tried to speak, but she kept her hand over his mouth. They reached the edge of the outpost, where her ship had landed. Half of it was crushed. Smoke rose from every corner. "No time," she muttered. "We go now." With shocking strength, she threw Eli into the cockpit. He hit his head and blacked out. When Eli woke up, everything felt wrong. He was lying on cold metal, his wrists bound behind his back. The ship rattled like it was falling apart. Red lights blinked all around him. She stood above him, still bleeding, still terrifying. "You're awake." "Good." "Whoa, where am I?" he stammered. "Inside my escape pod. You were useful." "So I took you." "I'm not important," he cried. "I just fix comm panels." Her eyes narrowed. "You know more than you think. You humans did something to my systems. I need your mind, or at least your hands." Suddenly the ship shook harder. Outside, blue lightning flashed. An alarm screamed in her language. She looked at the screen and hissed. "Gravity well," she shouted. "This planet, it's pulling us in." "What planet?" Eli yelled. She didn't answer. The pod spun, then smashed into something solid. Everything went black. This time when Eli woke, he felt heat. His head hurt. His wrists were still tied. But they weren't behind his back anymore. He sat up, dizzy. Sand covered his face. He looked around. The sky was yellow. Twin suns burned above strange cliffs. The land was cracked and dry. Strange plants twisted out of the ground like black claws. Smoke rose from the wrecked pod nearby. The alien woman stood outside, sword drawn, watching the horizon. "What is this place?" Eli asked. She didn't look at him. "We crashed." "No kidding." She finally turned. "This is Varos Prime. A death world." He blinked. "That's not real. That's a myth." "It's very real," she said darkly. "My people sent prisoners here to die. No maps, no rescue. Nothing survives long." He swallowed hard. "And now we're stuck?" She nodded. "Yes. You and I, stranded. And I still need your help." "I'm not helping you," he said. "You kidnapped me." She walked up to him, her boots crunching in the red dust. "You help," she said calmly, raising her blade to his neck. "Or I leave you here alone. Your bones will bake by sunset." Eli froze. She lowered the blade. "Choose." Eli looked at the wrecked ship, then at the twisted land stretching into the distance. A low growl echoed from a nearby canyon. He sighed. Fine, I'll help. But you untie me first. She stared at him, then slowly cut the rope. He rubbed his wrists, glared at her. What's your name? He asked. She looked at him with cold eyes. Captain Firexel, commander of the 6th Legion, and you, human, are my last chance. A strange howl rose in the distance, long, sharp, and close. Virex turned toward the sound and raised her sword. Stay behind me, she said. Eli nodded and reached for a broken piece of metal. The sun began to set. The real terror of Veros Prime was just waking up. They hunted together at dawn, but the planet hunts back. The sun rose with a violent heat, not warm and golden like Earth's sunrise, but harsh and silver, as if the sky itself was forged from metal. When Eli opened his eyes, his lips were dry and cracked. The wreckage of the escape pod still smoked behind him, and the air carried a sharp, burnt scent that made his lungs sting. He reached for the water flask Virex had given him the night before. It was empty. She was gone. Panic surged through him. He sat up quickly, eyes scanning the strange horizon. Cracked land stretched in all directions, dotted with jagged black stones and twisted trees that looked like they had grown in pain. Something moved in the distance, low, fast, and silent. Virex? He called out. His voice echoed thin and alone. Then suddenly a shadow blocked the light. He turned to see her towering above him, armor splattered with blue-green blood, and slung over her shoulder, a creature's head, the size of a grown man's torso, its jaw still twitching. You slept through the hunt, she said plainly. Pathetic. Eli stared at the thing's fangs, then at the gleam in her alien eyes. You went out there alone? I had to. You're soft. Slow. I needed food. She dropped the head beside the fire pit he'd tried to build the night before. It rolled, once then stopped, black ichor oozing from the neck stump. The smell was awful. Eli covered his nose. I was going to cook some roots I found. Roots won't feed us. You want to live? You eat what survives here? She pulled out a jagged blade and began carving into the beast's neck. Besides, the trees are toxic. He sat quietly for a moment watching her. There was something about the way she moved, wounded but strong, always alert. She didn't trust him, and he didn't trust her, but in this moment, she was the only reason he was still alive. Why were you near Earth space? He asked suddenly. She paused, her blade hovering over the flesh. That is none of your concern. You took me hostage, dragged me into this hell. I think I deserve a little truth. She gave him a long, unreadable stare. I was hunting something, and now something hunts us. Eli blinked. Wait, what? Virex stood and nodded to the hills behind them. The air shimmered there, not with heat, but with movement. Something was watching, something smart. This world doesn't just kill, she said. It adapts, learns. It has survived every weapon thrown at it. Now it studies us. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. You mean the animals? No. I mean the land, the roots, the soil, the air. It's all aware. Before he could ask more, a sharp clicking sound echoed from the rocks. Virex turned fast, sword drawn. From behind a crumbled pillar, long black limbs unfolded, like a spider but taller, and wearing a carapace that shimmered like steel. Stay behind me, she growled. But Eli didn't freeze this time. He dropped to the ground, pulled a small tool from his belt, and scanned the creature's signal. It was pulsing, low frequency like sonar. It's tracking our tech, he shouted. That's how it found us. Then we blind it, Virex said, and charged. The battle was chaos. Virex's strength was terrifying. She moved like a storm, slicing through one limb after another. But the spider thing didn't bleed. Its wounds hissed and closed, and it kept coming. Eli scrambled to the wreck, yanking wires, building something fast, a small pulse emitter. If it worked, it would blast the creature's senses just for a moment. Virex, duck! She didn't hesitate. Eli triggered the pulse. The sound was like a scream from the planet itself. The spider thing collapsed, limbs twitching, then went. Still. Virex stood slowly, panting. She looked at Eli. You did that? He nodded, shaking. I told you. I fixed things. For the first time, her expression shifted. Not fear, not hatred, something closer to surprise. You may be useful after all. As the suns climbed higher, they cooked the meat together. It was bitter and tough, but they ate in silence. They didn't speak of what just happened, not yet. The air was still, too still. Later, as Eli examined the scanner, he found something strange. An old signal buried deep beneath the sand. It wasn't natural. Virex, he said, pointing to the data. There's something down there. Metal. Big. She studied. The readings. Her eyes narrowed. That's not from this crash. No, Eli said. It's older. Maybe centuries. A base? A bunker? Or a tomb, she said. And as the two of them stood over the cracked earth, a new thought crept into both their minds. They hadn't just crashed on a wild planet. They had landed on something built long ago, and maybe meant to be forgotten. The signal in the storm, and a betrayal under fire. The sky darkened fast on Veros Prime. One moment the twin suns hung high like molten coins, and the next, shadows spread across the cracked land as a massive storm front rolled in from the west. The clouds weren't gray. They were violet, shifting like oil over water, and flashing from within with unnatural pulses of blue. Eli stared up at the sky in disbelief. That's not just weather. Virex didn't answer. She had seen storms like this before, during the war. But they were only reported in two places in the galaxy, old battlefield ruins and cursed worlds. She scanned the sky and hissed low under her breath. Electromagnetic disturbance, high level, strong enough to fry our sensors, and cook our brains if we're not careful. Eli was already gathering gear from what was left of the escape. Pod, 2 packs, 1 half-charged fusion cell, and a broken shield emitter. We need cover. There, Virex said, pointing toward a stone ridge in the distance. Half hidden in the swirling dust was a strange tower, tall and crooked, built from black metal that hadn't rusted, despite the savage wind tearing across it looked like it had no place in nature, like it had grown out of the planet itself. They made the trek quickly. Every few steps Eli stumbled, the wind pushing him sideways. Sand cut at his face like needles. Virex marched ahead like a tank, cutting through the storm with stubborn will. When they reached the base of the tower, they found a partially buried entrance. Virex cleared the stones with one sweep of her blade, and together they slipped inside, just as the sky let loose a deafening crack. Rain poured in sheets of silver flame behind them, sizzling as it struck the ground. Inside the tower, it was cool and silent. The walls pulsed with faint energy, lines of light running across, ancient, metal like veins under skin. Eli touched the wall, and for a moment it reacted, glowing faintly at the point of contact. This isn't alien, he whispered. At least, not the kind I expected. No, Virex said. Her voice was different, slower, softer. This predates my people. Yours too. They explored deeper. Rusted skeletons lay in the shadows, humanoid but taller, with long limbs and shattered armor. Some still held weapons fused into their arms. Eli shivered as they passed through a chamber, with curved glass tanks, each one cracked open. Some still held dried husks, shapes too vague to name. Prison? Eli asked. Virex shook her head. A research vault, or worse, an experiment site. In the next room they found a console. It was dormant until Eli approached. The lights pulsed, then flickered to life. A voice began to speak, not in any known language, but it wasn't speaking to them. It was repeating something. A warning. Eli looked down at the readout. He didn't recognize the script, but it responded to him. He tapped the pad. The words shifted. Slowly they formed a translation. Proving grounds. Final phase. Terminated. Subject, humanity. Lost line. Eli backed away. This place, it's linked to humans. Virex frowned. How is that possible? Before he could answer, the tower shook. A deep thudding sound echoed through the walls like footsteps. Heavy ones. Then came a voice. Sharp, military, and cruel. Captain Virex Zal. Surrender the human. You've failed your mission. Eli's blood froze. Virex stiffened. The voice belonged to Sergeant Krell, one of her own. She moved toward the entrance but didn't open it. She stayed silent. Eli turned to her. You called them? She didn't meet his eyes. I activated the beacon. Days ago. Before I knew what this place was. You lied to me. His voice cracked. You said we were alone. I needed backup, she said coldly. I didn't plan to die on this rock, or protect you. He took a step back. So you were just buying time, using me to fix your systems? But she didn't answer. Her silence said everything. The wall behind them exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. 2 armored figures stepped through, weapons drawn. Kneel, Krell ordered. Both of you. Virex raised her sword. He's not your target. Krell sneered. You're not in command anymore. Eli watched, stunned, as Virex stepped in front of him. For a moment, her back was straight, proud, like a true leader, not a scavenger. You touch the human, she said. You go through me. Krell laughed. Then you die with him. The battle was short and brutal. Virex fought like she had nothing left to lose. Her blade sang through the air, cutting sparks from enemy armor. Eli dove for cover, his heart racing. When it ended, one soldier lay dead. The other fled. Blood stained the tower floor. Virex stood over the corpse, her breath heavy, one hand clutching her side. They'll return, she said. With more. Eli stood slowly, hands shaking. Why did you defend me? She didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she said, because this world is changing me, and so are you. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, 2 survivors stood alone among the ruins of a secret far older than either of them had imagined. But now the clock was ticking and war was coming again. Mercy or mission, the choice that changes everything. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse than the storm. The tower's broken entrance still smoked from the firefight. Virex leaned against the wall, blood leaking from a deep gash in her side. Her breath came in short bursts. Her armor, once the symbol of command and pride, was cracked, burned, and clinging to her body like a second failing skin. Eli knelt beside her, carefully peeling away what he could to expose the wound. The air stank of metal and scorched nerves. This might hurt, he said. I've been stabbed with plasma and chewed on by mountain beasts, she muttered. Do what you must. But when the small torch he used sparked and hissed against her open wound, her teeth clenched so hard he heard the grinding. Eli didn't speak as he worked. His hands were steady now, not like the first night when fear had made him fumble everything. He had grown into this. The dirt. The danger. The alien warlord who now sat slumped in front of him, not as a conqueror but as a bleeding soul. One who had chosen to stand between him and her own people's guns. When the field patch finally took, and her breathing steadied, he looked her in the eye. You didn't have to protect me, he said quietly. But you did. Her gaze, usually sharp enough to cut stone, was softer now. Not weak, just tired. I'm not sure why I did, she admitted. Maybe because this place twists everything. Maybe because when I thought I would die, your face was the only thing I saw. He didn't know what to say to that. He just sat there watching her. Not as a hostage, not even as an enemy, but as a companion in something far larger than either of them had expected. By the next morning, Virex could move again. Not well, but enough. They took what weapons and supplies they could carry and left the tower behind, its strange lights flickering like dying stars. The ground beneath it still hummed with ancient power, but whatever secrets it had awakened, they would have to wait. A decision had to be made. Stay and wait for the next squad to arrive. Or run. "I know Krell," Virex said as they moved along a narrow canyon. "He will report me as a traitor. They'll send a destroyer next, no warning, no mercy." "Then we don't stay here," Eli said. She raised an eyebrow. "We?" "You saved my life," he said simply. "That makes us a team now, whether you like it or not." Her laugh was low and quiet, closer to a cough, but it was real. Together they followed a ravine into the northern cliffs, where Eli had once spotted strange rock formations that almost looked artificial. If there was another structure, another hidden base, it might be a place to hide. Maybe even a place to send a new signal, one not meant for Virex's people. But as they moved, the land grew stranger. The trees in this region didn't grow upward. They twisted into spirals, their leaves thin like blades. The ground pulsed faintly underfoot, and once Eli could have sworn it shifted behind them, like a ripple under the crust. And then they found it. Half buried in a pit of black soil, surrounded by strange pillars, was a small dome-like structure. It shimmered faintly, not metal, not stone, something in between. And from within, a soft pulse of blue light flickered. Not from damage. Not from decay. A signal. Eli reached out, and the structure opened. Inside was a single room, clean and untouched by time. In the center hovered a console unlike any he'd seen. Alien, yet oddly human in its symmetry. Symbols danced across the curved surface. Virex stood frozen. "I've seen this before," she said. "On a captured station orbiting the fringe, it was locked. It never responded." Eli stepped forward. The moment his hand hovered over the interface, it changed. The symbols shifted, twisted, and resolved into Terran script. "Welcome, linebearer." The room hummed louder. A new voice filled the air. Not mechanical, not cold. Gentle, female, ancient. Human genetic sequence detected. Access granted. Eli backed away. Wide-eyed, Virex grabbed his arm. "What did you do?" I didn't do anything." The voice spoke again. "Subject humanity remains viable. Initiating final record. Planetary defense awakening. External threat detected. Preparing judgment protocol." "What does that mean?" Eli shouted. The lights surged. The dome began to tremble. Outside, the ground cracked. Smoke poured from the pillars. Something beneath the planet, something deep, was waking. Virex stared at the console. Then at Eli. "You've triggered something they were afraid of," she said. "This wasn't a death world." He looked at her. "Then what was it?" "A test. And you just passed the first phase." Later that night, far away, in orbit just beyond the storm-wrapped atmosphere, a sleek destroyer slipped through the shadows. On board, Command Officer Talix read the incoming data from Krell's failed mission. A human. Survived, a captain. Gone rogue. And beneath the planet's crust, an activation signal older than the war itself. He tapped his communicator. "Prepare the purge fleet." They called her a traitor. Now she bleeds for a human. The wound. Beneath her ribs was worse than either of them had admitted. Virex never asked for help. She was bred, trained, and conditioned never to show weakness. But her body had begun to betray her. Eli noticed it in the way she moved. Her steps dragged slightly. Her breath came shorter. She didn't wince, but she paused longer between actions, her usual razor focus dulled by pain. Even her blade, which once never left her grip, was slung loosely across her back, as though the weight had become too much. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't want to insult her pride. But when she stumbled during their descent through the scarred ravine, collapsing against a jagged wall of stone, he didn't ask permission. He caught her before she could fall further, his arms wrapping awkwardly around her armored form. "Let me go," she growled weakly, but there was no force behind it. "No," he said. "Not this time." They found a hollow beneath a cluster of rock outcrops where the wind didn't scream and the shadows gave them cover. Eli set her down gently and began working, removing the cracked parts of her armor, cleaning the wound, again, and checking the pulse of her secondary heart. Alien biology wasn't his specialty, but he'd learned enough from her pained instructions, from the med scanner, from necessity. Virex watched him the entire time. "You should have left me," she muttered as he pulled a sealer patch across the deepest part of the wound. "You had the chance. I'm not leaving the only person who's fought to keep me alive," he said. Her eyes flickered, glowing faintly in the gloom. "I was never meant to protect you," she said. "My orders were clear. Capture a human asset, extract data, eliminate if compromised. And yet, here you are, bleeding in a hole because you stood between me and your own people." She closed her eyes, not in shame, but in something else. Something deeper. "I killed Krell because he stopped being a soldier and became a butcher. He didn't see what I see now." Eli paused, watching her. "And what's that?" Her voice was low, soft in a way that almost hurt to hear from someone who had once barked commands at war machines. "You're not weak. You're not prey. You're something this galaxy forgot existed. You protect. You rebuild. Even when it costs you." He didn't know what to say. So he did the only thing he could. He reached for her hand, not as a gesture of comfort, but as a reminder. You are not alone anymore. By the second day, she could walk again. Not well, but enough. They knew time was short. The signal Eli had triggered had activated more than just ancient lights and cryptic messages. It had sent a pulse, one that wouldn't go unnoticed. Sure enough, the scanners began picking up the signs. 3 destroyers, fast, armed, headed straight for the planet. Virex stared at the readings, her jaw tight. "They're coming to erase this place, not to rescue me, not anymore." Eli sat across from her, cleaning the small EMP trap they'd salvaged. "They're scared of what's here." "They should be," she said. "Your DNA unlocked something our ancestors buried for a reason." "So what do we do?" She stood, slower than usual, and looked out at the horizon. In the distance, the jagged hills sparkled faintly. The glow was stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the ground. "We make a choice," she said. "We run and hide, or we fight and finish what they started thousands of years ago." Eli didn't hesitate. "We finish it." She smiled. A real one this time. Not cruel, not mocking, just honest. "Then let's wake the world." They returned to the buried dome and entered the structure again. It had grown warmer, the lights brighter. And this time, when Eli approached, the voice greeted him differently. Linebearer recognized. Final phase access granted. Guardian status. Pending. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Virex stared at the console, then pointed. "That symbol. It's not a word, it's a key." Eli touched it. The floor began to descend. Slowly, a platform lowered them into darkness. For minutes there was nothing but the hum of ancient power. And then they reached it. A chamber the size of a city, filled with machines shaped like serpents, wings like folded metal, and statues of beings who were not quite human and not quite alien. At the center, a throne, or perhaps a command seat, floated in a beam of blue light. Virex stepped forward, awe creeping into her voice. This was a command nexus, for a fleet. A guardian fleet. Eli stared at the symbols glowing on, the ground beneath them. Some were alien, some were human, and some were both. "These people, they were us," he whispered. "Long ago. Or what we were meant to become." Suddenly, The light flared. Intrusion detected, the voice announced. Purge fleet entering orbit. Activation required. Guardian must bond. Virex turned to him. They want you to take control. You can end this before it starts. Eli hesitated. But if I do, what happens to you? She blinked. What do you mean? If this thing sees your kind as the threat, it might destroy you too. She looked away, jaw tightening. Then you do what must be done. Eli stepped toward the beam. The console flared again. One last confirmation. Do you accept guardianship? He turned to her one last time. I won't destroy what saved me. Virex stared at him speechless, and then he stepped into the light. Above them, in the cold silence of orbit, the three destroyers received a new signal, one not sent from any government, fleet, or empire. It was a command. It was a warning, and it made even the most hardened war captain flinch. This world is protected. Death world no more. They unleash what should have stayed buried. The moment Eli stepped into the light, the chamber trembled as though the planet itself had been holding its breath. Blue lines of energy snaked from the floor, wrapping gently around his arms and legs, not binding but recognizing, accepting, responding. Virex watched from the edge of the platform, her hands resting on the hilt of her blade, her face carved with a strange mix of awe and dread. She had led 100 war campaigns, burned worlds, crushed rebellions, but nothing in her life had prepared her for this. Watching a human technician awaken a power that made the empires of the galaxy look like children with toy swords. Air around Eli shimmered. Above him, the command nexus rotated slowly, revealing layers of dormant technology now sparking with life. The voice that had once spoken in cryptic tones now rang out clearly, and it no longer sounded ancient. It sounded human. Guardian accepted. Vault Nexus online. Defensive intelligence at 43% capacity. Awaiting activation protocols. Warning. External threat approaching. Time to surface breach. 12 minutes. Eli turned to Virex, his body glowing faintly. It's giving us control. We can repel the destroyers, but it's not just weapons. What else? She asked, stepping cautiously toward the center. This planet, it wasn't a prison. It was a forge. A forge for what? Touch the panel again, and from the surrounding walls images emerged. Holograms of tall beings, neither human nor alien, wearing armor that shifted with their bodies. They stood in rows, raising weapons not to conquer but to protect. Behind them stood humans, smaller, younger, but identical to Eli in form. Coexistence protocol, the voice intoned. Test subjects designed to unify legacy species. Humanity was meant to merge with guardian races, but the link was severed. The program failed. One escaped. Virex's breath caught. One escaped? Yes, the voice said. One original seedling. It fled with the last of the hybrid prototypes. It warned others. And they erased us to stop the Union. Eli understood. Thousands of years ago, the galaxy had feared what humanity and its ancient cousins could become, together. So they destroyed the project, turned the forge into a tomb, spread the lie of the death world, and waited for it to fade into myth. But it hadn't. It had waited. For him. Suddenly the ground above them groaned. Dust rained from the ceiling. The defense system flared red. Purge fleet firing planetary disruptor. Direct strike in 11 minutes. Recommend full activation. Eli looked to Virex. We can use the surface weapons. Stop them before they fire again. Her face was hard. They won't stop with one strike. Once they realize I've turned, they'll send everything. Your people too, if they ever find out what this place really is. He nodded. Then we show them. She stepped forward, placing her hand next to his on the interface. The light pulsed, first blue, then white. Bond acknowledged. The system said. In an instant, the entire planet responded. Across Veros Prime, towers long buried, beneath sand and stone rose from the earth. They bloomed like steel flowers, their cores glowing with raw energy. The sky lit up with sigils, ancient languages that burned through the clouds, sending a signal not just upward, but across space. From the cliffs to the toxic swamps, mechanical forms stirred. Guardians, 10, then 20, then hundreds, emerged. From slumber. Some walked like titans, others flew on silent wings. They did not speak. They simply moved to protect. The world was awake. In orbit, the lead destroyer's captain stood frozen, eyes wide as he watched the surface shift beneath. "Him! What in the name of the throne is that?" one officer whispered, signal strength rising. "It's not a distress call, it's a challenge." Then the incoming message cut through their comms like a blade. "This planet is under the protection of Guardian Protocol Alpha. Withdraw. Final." Warning, the captain hesitated, and in that hesitation the surface defenses fired. Beams of light erupted from the towers below, slicing through the void like divine judgment. 2 destroyers lost shields instantly. The third tried to fire its disruptor weapon, but the shot was intercepted mid-air by a winged guardian the size of a dreadnought. The destroyers broke formation, retreated, fled. The message was clear. Varos Prime was not theirs, not anymore. Back beneath the surface, Eli fell to his knees, exhausted. The energy had drained him. His skin was pale, his lips cracked. But he was smiling. "They're gone," he whispered. Virex knelt beside him, gently lowering him to the floor. "You stopped them." He coughed. "No, we did." She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the faint thrum of the guardian light still inside him. "This power, it's not yours to carry alone." He nodded. "Then don't let me carry it alone." Her eyes softened. She leaned closer. "I won't." For the first time, no walls stood between them. No species, no mission, no war. Just 2 beings, forged by fire, standing at the center of a world that had tried to break them both, and failed. Above them, deep in space, the signal they'd sent continued to ripple. Across forgotten systems. Into the hearts of other ancient worlds, stirring things that had slumbered for far too long. And among the stars, eyes opened, eyes that remembered, eyes that feared what the Guardians had once been, and what they might become again. One chose vengeance, the other chose him. The air on Varos Prime had changed. The wind no longer screamed with the cries of a dying world. The skies, once bruised and heavy with storm, now shimmered with thin bands of silver, soft and watchful. The land beneath had stilled, as though the planet itself, long asleep, had exhaled and decided to live again. Eli stood atop a jagged ridge near the Guardian spire they had claimed as home. His skin still bore the faint glow of the bond, but it was dimmer now, gentle like a memory that refused to fade. He stared at the twin suns rising over the horizon, bathing the stone ruins in light. Every morning, it looked a little less like a graveyard, and more like something waiting to be reborn. Behind him, Virex Zal walked in silence. Her armor had changed. The old war markings had been removed. In their place were patterns from the Guardian language, symbols of protection, unity, and trust. She wore them not for battle, but as a declaration that she was no longer who she had been. "Fleet command will come eventually," she said, her voice low. "Maybe not today, maybe not for weeks, but they will come." Eli didn't look at her. "I know. And they'll expect a war. They'll find a message instead." She came to stand beside him. "We've both made enemies," she said. Eli nodded. "Then let's make something better than enemies." For days after the destroyers retreated, the Guardians had remained silent, dormant again beneath the surface. But one, tall, winged, with eyes like molten gold, had stayed. It didn't speak, didn't interfere, but watched, as if guarding not the planet, but them. Eli had begun calling it Sentinel. He and Virex had learned to communicate with the Nexus, a slow, careful process. The vault held not just power, but memories, archives of the ancient project, logs from both human and alien voices. They discovered a name for what this place once was: Project Hearthseed. A final hope to unite the dying threads of civilization in a time when war had almost torn the galaxy into silence. But the project had failed. Fear had won. Someone had erased it all. Until now, and now, two survivors stood where extinction had once reigned. That night, as stars stretched across the purple-black sky, a flicker of light appeared above the atmosphere. An approaching shuttle. Sleek, unmarked. Virex saw it first. She raised her blade by reflex, but didn't move to attack. "Not one of ours," she muttered, "but not hostile." Eli stared at the trajectory. They found the signal, not fleet, not enemy, just curious. The shuttle landed slowly in the clearing near the tower. Dust curled around its feet. The hatch hissed open, and from within stepped a single figure, small, cloaked, face obscured by a reflective visor. They approached without fear. Virex tensed, but the figure removed their hood. A woman, human, older with streaks of gray in her hair and eyes sharp with experience. "I received your message," she said simply. "The galaxy doesn't believe in legends. But I came anyway." Eli stepped forward. "Who are you?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who still believes humans were meant for more than fighting other people's wars." She looked to Virex. "And you? You were the war." Virex didn't deny it. "I was, until I found something more important than orders." The woman nodded slowly. "Then maybe the galaxy is ready to listen." Over the following weeks, more came. Not in fleets, not in armies, but in scattered pairs and trios. Researchers, healers, the lost and the curious. Some human, some alien. A few were even exiles from Virex's former empire, those who had once served her, now drawn by a myth that whispered through the void. The death world breathes again, and always at the center of it all were Eli and Virex, not rulers, not leaders. Just the first to trust across species, the first to protect rather than conquer, the first to choose each other, even when everything around them had once screamed that they shouldn't. One night, sitting beside a fire built from heat stones and polished scrap, Eli looked across at Virex. Her face was illuminated in flickering gold. For the first time, she looked peaceful. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "I regret the blood," she said finally. "But not the journey, not where I landed." Eli smiled. "You landed on me." She smirked. "Crushed you, didn't I?" "A little." Silence passed between them, warm and easy. Then she added, "And what about you? Any regrets?" He looked up at the stars. "I used to fix broken machines, wires, screens, things no one remembered." He looked at her. "Now I'm fixing the future."